All right, so I'm going to be reading off my laptop because I had to organize all my thoughts, but we're going to, work through this together. So, the thesis of this is that every civilization I'm going to talk about is built around mathematics. Not counting, mathematics, things that were discovered due to, abstraction, proof, or systems that hold regardless of language, dogma, so on and so forth. It's mathematics. And the first 10 chapters of this, and I'm saying chapters because I'm going to do this as a full video, but then I'm going to chop it down in chapters for the social medias, and the full length video will be in YouTube because it's going to be a long video, okay? Are going to be the first 10 chapters, everything are, you know, things that have already been discovered, written about, that you can go check. And then the last 4 or 5 are where I synthesize this and what I took from it and the conclusion that I reached based on all of this data and my take on it. And hopefully it resonates with you. So all of these civilizations did everything separately though, and across millennia. The Egyptians, the Inca, the Mexica, the Aboriginals, everyone did their own thing, but at the end of it, everything is rooted in mathematics. So, for example, Egypt encoded a geometric proof into a rope a laborer could use to build the pyramid without having the ability to read the hieroglyphics. That's because it's mathematics. Math is a language, and that is a language that's going to transcend every single civilization. The Mexica built a calendar out of 20 signs but 13 numbers, the trecena, and it runs 260 days without repeating, and people are still counting it, using it. Native people in Mexico and other places are still using the trecena. The Yoruba in Africa developed the formal-based 20 mathematics and carried the whole thing in memory with no writing system at all. Just in their songs, in their rituals, in their religion, it's based in mathematics. The Inca recorded an empire, census, tribute, astronomy in a knotted cord in base 10 invented from scratch. So while this doesn't tie to the number 13 as much as other things that I'm going to talk about, it's still rooted in mathematics. Aboriginal Australians encoded a continent's worth of navigation, law, and astronomy into songs and kept it accurate for 65,000 years. So what do we know about music? It's mathematical, right? That the notes, it's in quarter, it scales in quarters, quarter beats, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, right? The drums, bum bum bum, bum bum bum. It's music. Musical is a mathematical. Music is math. And Indians mapped the structure of reality into levels, the 7 chakras, right? And the 13 levels. Vedic astrology. China built a binary system 3,000 years before anyone had used for binary. Astrology, 12 signs plus the sun, 13. The ancient Greeks, and I'm sure you're going to say, well, it was Zeus and his 5 siblings, and 6 of his children were the Olympian gods. But where they all came from? Chronos, right? So Saturn, Chronos. 13. You're starting to see where people took the number of 13 and used it to reinterpret certain things. And I told you guys about zeitgeist before, but this didn't even come from that. This was just me taking everything that I've learned throughout my life, and then I started seeing the numerical sequences. And in Baghdad, scholars did something nobody in history really did. They went looking for the knowledge that all these other civilizations had and translating it instead of doing what the colonizers did, which was burn it. Because 500 years ago, different empires arrived from Europe, which we know happened after the fall of Rome and those, Christianity and all of that, and the Abrahamic religion split, which is literally what is tearing our world apart right now. And about 500 to 600 years ago, they came into the American continents, and then eventually they made it to Asia. Now you gotta remember, back then during the Crusades and stuff, they would go via land, and they never made it past the Arab countries. And eventually they started doing the Silk Road and stuff and made it to China and so on and so forth. But they didn't know where Korea was, they didn't know where Japan was. The Pacific and all that came after the Americas and after they kept sailing and discovering, according to them, right? So, but the thing is, throughout time and throughout civilizations, Mesopotamia, you know, Jesus and the 13th apostles, all of this stuff. You keep seeing these numbers, these numerical things. And what I felt was that all of these are pointing to the same thing, which is the sacred math, sacred geometry, the geometry of humanity. And then I went down some rabbit holes, okay? And I'm going to keep reminding you that the rabbit holes are my interpretation. That's not based on fact. That's based on my conjecture, on my educated guess. That's my hypothesis for this thesis. The first 10 chapters of this, which was what I just discussed right now, and what's coming forth, are going to be actually rooted in what's already been documented. So let's talk about the knotted rope. This is chapter 2. I'm going to keep doing this thing with the numbers because, you know. So Egypt, thousands of years ago, there was a rope with 13 knots tied at 12 equal intervals. That was the toolkit that they used to build the pyramids. 12 intervals divide cleanly into 3, 4, and 5. Stake at the rope at those 3 points, pull it taut, and the corner you get is exactly going to be 90 degrees. No instrument, no calculation, there's no literacy required for this. That's how they figured out the perfect angle for the pyramid. Every temple corner, every foundation, every fill boundary resurveyed after the Nile flood erased it, and erased every single year, which is exactly what Egypt got really good at this. They had to figure out a system where, you know, it would transcend time and the seasons and, you know, natural disasters. So this is the part where I went into. They took geometric proof, the abstract relationship between 3 numbers, and they built it into a physical object. So they took the mathematical theory and created something tangible into rope and knots, so that everybody who couldn't read, who never heard the word geometry or even understood what it was, could still pick it up and use the tool to get to the final creation. The knowledge of how to get it done lived in the tool, regardless whether you understood what the mechanics behind it were. And the number of knots that it takes to make this whole thing work is the number 13. There's 13 knots on this rope. This doesn't mean that Egypt worshipped the number 13. That's not what I'm saying here. It means that you need 12 equal intervals. That 12 equal intervals need 13 knots. In order to get those 12 little sections, you need 13 knots. So, you know, the one at the end, the 2 ends, and then 11 in between to create those 12 intervals. And 12 is the smallest numbers that was going to give you 3, 4, and 5 in order to be able to get those perfect 90-degree angle corners. So 13 is what falls out of the geometry. This is the recurring theme that I saw. Okay? So now let's move on to 3. The count of days. And that is about a Native American and more than anything, Mexica. Now, there's other, like the Purepecha, the Maya, they have their own names for this, but because Mexica is what is more widely known, I'm focusing on that terminology, but that is not to dismiss anything or any other contributions of other native tribes. By all means, jump in the comments and tell me if you're from a different tribe, what they call it in your tribe, because it's important that we, again, realize that the different tribes, different civilizations had different names for the same thing, and they were trying to come to the same concept. Okay? The Tonalpohualli, the count of days, that is Mesoamerica. 20 day signs. So the Mesoamerican astrology has 20 signs, and each section, instead of being 23 days, like the, you know, tropical astrology, it's 13. They call it a trecena. So 13 days, trecena. Every day carries one of each, and the combinations don't repeat for 260 days. Right? Because 20 times 13 is 260. Okay? And then starts again. This isn't a rounding of a solar year. It's its own cycle, independent cycle, running alongside the solar calendar, meshing with it like 2 years with 2 different tooth counts, like 2 year shifts. The only two realign every 52 years, and that realignment was one of the most important events in Mesoamerican life. So these 2 calendars synced up once every 52 years. 260 days is also roughly the amount it takes for a human to be gestated in a woman's womb. It's about 9 months, give or take, 40 weeks. It's roughly also the agricultural cycle. In Mesoamerica, it's the interval between solar zenith passages. Each 13-day period, a trecena had its own patron or its own saint or its own sign, its own character, its own energy that colored all those 13 days. Specialists read it. A child born on a certain day carries that sign's energy and that sign's shape, what was expected of them, like the roles in society, like kind of like we say Libra, Taurus, whatever, kind of the same thing. The Mexica held that this count was not like a decorative. They held that the cosmos required this. So they understood the cosmos, the universe, life as what required it. That the mathematics of time had to be maintained or things would fall apart. That sacred math, the creation would fall apart if you didn't keep up with it. Again, I'm just describing what it was. I'm not telling you that this is what you have to believe. I'm just sharing this with you. The origins of these systems go back to the Olmec, which is the first millennium before the common era of what we know to be Mesoamerican tribes. It was used by the Maya, the Mixtec, the Zapotec, the Mexica, or as you guys know them, the Aztecs. And it is still being used now. The Mixe in Oaxaca, Maya communities in Guatemala, they still practice the tercenas. They still run it. Communities that have indigenous language that haven't been assimilated into Western culture still hold down to the roots. So when the Spanish burned the codices or whatever that we had, they burned the books, they couldn't fully stop the counts, and that lives ingrained in cultural knowledge and in cultural remembrance of the people that are still practicing this. And this is where then this entire series, where the 13 is unambiguously textually load-bearing, it's real here, right? 20 times 13 equals 260, and people have been counting it for 2,000 years, at least here in the America, and at least 1,500 years before the Spanish and the European conquistador, all those people came and fucked shit up over here. Because I'm going to talk about places where it's not 13, but there's still math, okay? Let's go to chapter 4. Mathematics without writing. West Africa, the Yoruba. Not base 10, 20. Distinct terms for 1 through 10, then 20, then 30, 200, 400, 2,000, and everything in between constructed by multiplication, addition, and subtraction, often within the same expression. To say a number in Yoruba, you sometimes have to run a calculation. The number is a calculation. And they did this without having a system to write. So they counted it without writing it down. Like you and I have to write 4 times 3 equals 12. They did this all in their mind. They didn't have the language to write, 4 times 3 times whatever. So from a Western point of thinking, we seem to think that we need to write to come up with abstract mathematics, you have to write it out. You need to externalize symbols to manipulate them. But Yoruba mathematics proves this as a counterexample. Formal reasoning, complex operations, a full numeration system without having to write it down. Think about how amazing that is. They carried an entire language, memory and in practice. And the language was mathematical. There's no hieroglyphics, there's no words, no. It's all in their spoken word and in their mind. I mean, that was amazing. The Ifa divination system runs on binary distinctions that result into 256 figures each. There you go, 256, huh? Getting close to that 260, but it's 256. Each with an enormous body of associated verse that a diviner has to hold in memory. There is a 2023 paper in the Scientific African giving an algebraic characterization of the codes. You hear that? Algebraic equation of these codes. There's papers out there. You guys can go look this up. It is fascinating. I want to read all of them. But I noticed that there's no 13 here. Yoruba mathematics is base 20. It doesn't feature the number that I named this series after, and what led me into this rabbit hole. But I'm putting it in because it's important to understand that the argument was never that people found the same number. The fact that 13 led me down this rabbit hole doesn't mean that everything has to equal 13, but everything does have math, and that is the message here. The argument is that anywhere, everywhere, if given the chance, human civilizations built the math. And the Yoruba did it in a mode that Europeans didn't even recognize as mathematics when it showed up. Like, they didn't understand that it was math. And that's why they called it primitive, when in reality it was far more advanced than anything of these European colonizers could even think about. It was oral history, oral mathematics represented through generations and through deities and practice. That is amazing. And they called it primitive. Who's ignorant now, huh? Anyways, so now let's go into chapter 5. Let's talk about stuff that's still surviving today, and to look into that, we're going to look into the Inca and Peru. Okay, South America, the Andes, the Quipu. A main cord, pendant cords hanging from it, subsidiary cords hanging from those cords. So you build cord on cord, knots tied in clusters, and measure positions among each cord. It's a base 10 positional system. Like the Yoruba has base 20, this is base 10. The position of the knot cluster tells you the place value. Different knot types encode different digits. Cord color and arrangement carry additional categories. The Inca ran an empire on these methods, okay? They did tribute. They did census. They had storehouse inventories. They had their own accounting, military logistics, a calendar. They had specialists they called Quipucamayocs that maintained these systems and could read them back to you. They had their own mathematicians. Guys, this is insane. Because the Inca, very much like the Aztecs in their own way, and the Yoruba and everyone I'm talking about, the Egyptians had entire civilizations prior to Europeans coming in and calling it everything, because they couldn't understand that these people were far more advanced than they were. So, okay? So, there you go. Base 10, positional, independently invented in the Andes with no contact with any other place. The Spanish destroyed them in enormous numbers. Over 1,000 pre-Columbian quipus still exist in collections. In 2014, 25 well-preserved ones turned up in Incahuasi. In some Andean communities, knotted cord recording never actually stopped. People are still practicing this. So again, the inconvenience here is it's base 10, not 13. But like I said, it wasn't so much. 13 led me down the rabbit hole. Doesn't fit the pattern. Neither did the Yoruba base 20, and neither do the song lines. So there's no secret universal number per se. If I wanted to push that, I wouldn't tell you about this, because this is still evidence. If every civilization had landed in 13, it would suggest contact. Somebody carried it. The fact that they landed on 10, 20, and 13 and built entirely different architectures on top of each proves that they weren't copying. They built it from nothing, from alone. Like, these different civilizations came to mathematical understandings on their own and derived numerical systems to explain what they perceived to be their reality or their origin, or how their civilizations ran, how their societies ran, without the language that we use now, and without a lot of the ideologies that are sinking us deeper and deeper into loss. And that is what is actually true here. Okay? Every single civilization has used mathematics in its inception and to formulate and capture information and to code or encode what their civilization was and how they operated. It was all based in mathematics. All right, let's go to chapter 6. 6. Again, I'm doing this so I can trim this later. The 13 levels, 13 months. These are two little parts because they show different things. India first, okay? Vedic and Puranic cosmology maps look into lokas or levels. Lokas, lokas or levels, worlds, planes. Some traditions count 13. And I have to tell you, 14 is also more common enumeration. 7 up and 7 uppers, 7 lowers, 7 chakras, you know? The 13 level reading comes from specific commentarial traditions. It's real, it's textual, and it's not the only count because we have established that different groups might have used 14 versus 13, but the core of it is it's still mathematical. So I'm telling you, because I could have just said 13 levels and moved on and been like, oh, I want to be right, but you guys would have checked me. And I'm not here to lie to you, and I'm not here to make myself the be all know-all. This is just really fascinating stuff. Okay? And I want to be the person who read the material and who's like telling you, like, hey, you know, this is where I'm getting this from. And you have to really look into the principle underneath it, that the idea that a cosmic, the earthly, and the human are structured in the same way at different scales, and we're using math to talk about it. The correspondence, what governs the sky, governs the bodies, as above, so below. It's the same types of thoughts across all these different civilizations that, as far as we know, hadn't made contact. Because you're not gonna, I don't know that Mexicas went over to India at the time before Europe came over and made contact. And it would be fascinating if they did and if we had that knowledge, but we don't have that knowledge now, so we can't claim that, right? So this is just showing that the idea of this shows up in mathematics and Indian temple architecture and astronomy and prosody. Okay? Indian mathematicians were doing serious work on pi, on combinatorics, on the numerical system that would eventually become the numerical system that we now use. And that is mind-blowing. Okay, so now let's talk about China a little bit. Asia. This would be China. The I Ching is 3,000 years old. Roughly, right? And it runs on a binary distinction. Broken line, solid line. Stack 3 and you get 8 trigrams. Stack 6 and you get 64 hexagrams. 2 to the third, 2 to the 6th. That's a binary system built for divination. 3 millennia before anybody had a machine that needed it like we have now. Right? Fascinating. The Chinese calendar is lunisolar, which creates one specific problem. A lunar month is about 29.5 days. Hey girl, period. Haha, you saw what I did there? 12 of them come up about every 11 days, short of a solar year. So the calendar drifts a little. Every 2 or 3 years, you have to insert an extra month to pull it back. A 13th month. No mystical, it's just mathematical, right? The moon and the sun don't divide evenly, so lunisolar calendars need a 13th month. And Hebrew and Chinese and others all arrive at that independently for the same physical reason. That is convergence when what it looks like when it's real. Same sky, same arithmetic, same answer, completely different cultural identity. Completely different civilizations. Woo! I know, right? Okay. 65,000 years. Australia. The Aboriginals, okay? 65,000 years of continuous culture, the longest unbroken civilization in Earth, and no writing system either, very much like the Yoruba. It's crazy shit, right? They did it in song, they did it with music, and we've already established that music is mathematical. A songline is song sequence that corresponds to a physical route across the country. Y'all, the Aboriginals use songs as maps. The order of the verses is the order of the landmarks. Okay? You sing it correctly, you get from point A to point B, you know where the water is, where the food is, where the sacred sites are, whose country you're entering, and what the protocols are. It was all in the songs. These routes are not just 1 or 2 kilometers. They could be thousands of kilometers. They cross the territory of groups speaking completely different languages. And the melodic contour carries it across the language boundary. They're not focused on the language. They're focused on the melody. The melody is mathematical. Do you understand? I mean, shit, right? So a person can follow the song into the country where they don't even speak a word that's spoken in that part of the country or that location, but because they know the melody, and the melody transcends language, and melodies are based on mathematics, you know, the tones, the notes, they're mathematical. Quarter note, half note, full note. 1 beat, quarter beat, full beat, right? It's so like fascinating to me. So there's a navigation system, a legal system, a genealogy, a pharmacopoeia, and astronomy, all encoded in a form where you can do it walking, perform rather than store. So the Aboriginals store all of their data in songs. And they were able to communicate amongst different tribes or different Aboriginal countries within the continent of Australia based on melody. Even if the words being sung were different. You go la da 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 da. Oh yeah, la da 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 da. Melody, right? Tell me that song. How's it go again? Oh yeah, I know that song. Do you know the song? No. You can, and it's funny because even if we don't speak the same language, if we can tune a song that's universally known, the music is the beats, that's what resonates in the brain and makes you remember the song, right? I know. I'm just like, I literally woke up my husband last night when I finished all of this, like talking it out and resonating with it. And I'm like, holy shit. Okay. The astronomy is precise with the Aboriginals. Aboriginal astronomical traditions include dark constellations, shapes read in the distance of the Milky Way, not in the stars. The emu in the sky, its position through the year tracks emu breeding season. So when they were tracking where the emus were going to breed, they were looking to the sky, and that's how they knew when they were breeding X number of time passed. And there's something else. Aboriginal oral traditions along the coastline describe the sea rising and drowning land that used to be walkable, so tides rising and lowering. And researchers have compared those accounts to the geological record of post-glacial sea level rise. So in other words, the songs that recorded these sea levels rising would probably match if they did any carbon dating on the cliffs and whatnot, and they do. They match. And those things happened over 7,000 years ago. $7,000 ago with the details not touched. We didn't start writing until about 5,000 years ago. Think about what that means, y'all. We've built the entire concept of civilization along the technology of writing, right? That's what makes us civilized and educated. And use the absence of writing to call people primitive and ignorant when they were running knowledge systems that outperform the Western European knowledge systems in the one metric that actually matters, which is where the information survives. Information is mathematical. There's no number 13 in this chapter either, just so you know. I'm just like, the obsession with 13 comes from the Europeans, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but the proof that I'm describing is better because it's sophisticated, durable, accurate knowledge doesn't require any of the apparatuses or the systems that we think it needs to exist. Like capitalism, like Greek-based government systems and laws. Because all of this predates that bullshit. Okay, so then let's talk about those at chapter 8, the ones that did not burn it. So all of these things up to chapter 7, it was every single civilization individually, right? It happened isolated. This is where we have a bridge. And this is where algebra is born, and there's a lot of scientific discovery, surgery, medicine that comes out of this that has actually impacted our current lives as well, and that comes from Baghdad, 8th century Baghdad. This is different, right? This is the hinge of the whole series here. Okay, so scholars there did something no other empire did. They went looking for other people's knowledge and they translated it instead of destroying it. See, the Spaniards came and destroyed all of our stuff, and Baghdad they were like, nay, let's translate, let's figure this out. Greek texts, Persian texts, Sanskrit astronomy and mathematics, Euclid's geometry, with Europe had lost and would not see again for 400 years until it came back to them in Arabic. Around the 820, around the year 820, a scholar named Al-Khwarizmi wrote a book. The title is The World Algebra. Aljabr. Algebra. And its own name run through Latin European scholars, which is Al-Khwarizmi, Al-Khwarizmi, became algorithmy. Algorithm. Every piece of software on a device where you're watching me right now, where we work, everything that it pushes our technology right now, is named after a Persian mathematician working in Baghdad 1200 years ago, who also took a numerical system he learned from Indian mathematics, including zero, which the concept of zero we know was accredited to the Maya, and wrote it out in Arabic. Those numerals reached Europe through Fibonacci in 1202, 1202, Anno Domini, the Fibonacci sequence. In Europe, they won't pay attention to it for 200 years, 2 centuries. The digits you count with. The Europeans didn't want it. They didn't want the numbers. But look what happened when they took. What did you buy? What did they buy? Ibn al-Haytham, around 1021, wrote the Book of Optics. He didn't just theorize about vision. He designed controlled experiments and threw out the answers that failed. That's the experimental method. 600 years before Europe called it the scientific method. They were doing it in Baghdad. Ibn Sina finished the Canon of Medicine in 1025. It stayed on the required reading list in European medical schools into the 1600s. 6 centuries of European physicians trained on a Persian textbook on medicine. Al-Sarawi designed surgical instruments a surgeon today would recognize on sight. And the geometry. In 2007, 2 physicists published in Science on the tilework of Darb-i-Imam shrine in Isfahan, built in 1453. What is in those patterns is quasi-crystalline geometry, a form of Western mathematics they didn't formally describe until Penrose in the 1970s. So we didn't catch up to what they were talking about in 1453 till the 1970s up in the Western civilization. Now you see the way they want to get rid of Iran and all the Arab countries. Now you see why Israel is hell-bent on doing that? And the United States? Because they are the Rosetta Stone that ties us to what we know inside of our souls is right. That's the con. It's 500 years early on a wall the entire time, and Europeans couldn't bring themselves to look at it till 500 years later. Look it up. Half the stars have Arabic names. Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Vega, Altair, Rigel. Every astronomer who says those words is speaking a language that kept the skies records when nobody else was paying attention, way before Galileo. Here's the point. For 5 centuries, mathematics and medicine and optics and astronomy advanced faster in the Islamic world than anywhere on earth. And the reason isn't mysterious, and it isn't racial, and it isn't divine favor. They just didn't erase the math. They found the Greek knowledge and translated it. They found the Indian numerals and adopted them. They found Persian astronomy and extended it. They treated other people's mathematics as something to keep building upon. They took the original thesis, the original data, extrapolated, and built on it and discovered more. Knowledge compounds. Exponents. That's the whole secret. Which is going to tell you what the next chapter actually costs. Chapter 9. What they shared with us, or what was shared. So let's be honest about the number where 13 is real. The Tonapohualli, 20 times 13 equals 260, written down, counted for 2,000 years to counted today. That's not interpretation, that's 13. Lunisolar calendars, 12 lunar months fall short of a solar year, so you insert to 13. Chinese, Hebrew, and others reached that independently. Same sky, different arithmetic. Same idea. The Egyptian rule of 12 intervals required 13 knots. It's not in Yoruba because it's base 20. Inca base is 10. Vedic lokas are more often counted as 14, sometimes as 13. Song lines aren't numbered at all, but they do have mathematical basis for beats, tones, notes, etc. And Fibonacci, yes, 13 is a term in the sequence of the Fibonacci sequence. So are 8 and 21. Picking 13 out of that sequence is choosing your evidence, and I'm not trying to choose my evidence, okay? So what did they share? It wasn't a number, it was the method. The method. Every one of these cultures did the same 4 things. They observed carefully over long periods of time. They found patterns, regularities. So they built a system that captured that regularity. They built something to describe the patterns they were watching, and they built the system into something that you could transmit: a rope, a calendar, a chord, a song, a divination practice. So the knowledge would continue to transcend the person who found it. It would go generation after generation, and you would not lose the knowledge that you had. That's what we do as humans. We continue to share and expand on things and think, if nobody tells us not to, or no one tries to stop us from doing so. So those systems look differently in different civilizations precisely because they were built independently of each other for the most part, right? Base 10 and base 20 and base 13 and binary, different answers, but the activity is the same. Convergence where the physical world forces it, the moon, the year, the right angle, divergence everywhere else. That is the fingerprint of independent discovery. If they all match, then it would be evidence of contact. But we don't have it because some of these civilizations didn't contact each other. And number 13 is how I got into this. Is not what I found. It's just what led me here. What I found is that the capacity for mathematics is universal and the outcomes were not. And the difference between the next two is the next chapter. Okay, so it's going to be the last chapter based on historical accounts and what we know. Chapter 10, the burning. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued Inter Cathedra. It declares that land not held by Christians is available for seizure and grants it. It is the legal spine of what becomes known as the doctrine of discovery. Remember I told you the Spaniards got the most of it because they were all in cahoots with the Holy Roman Emperor and all that bullshit, so they got the majority of, you know, the United States, Mexico, and all the way down. And then Portugal got Brazil. And then, you know, the 13 colonies happened after in the 1600s. And then France took Canada. You see where I'm coming with this, right? I remember Florida was Ponce de Leon. It was all the Spanish because they were in proximity to the Pope. That's why Spanish is spoken so much in Central and Latin America. Okay? The versions of it end up embedded in property law of multiple modern nations, including this one. So, this is not the side effect of the conquest. This is the programming of the conquest. In Mesoamerica, missionaries burned the codices. They were not straight documents. They burned libraries. They burned all the knowledge, astronomical tables, calendar records, histories, genealogies, land records. The count of days was in all of our books and all of our literature and all of our codices and all of our scrolls, and they burned it. In the Andes, the quipus were destroyed as idolatrous. An imperial administrative and mathematical record deliberately unread and burned. In West Africa, divination systems, recurring enumeration systems were suppressed as witchcraft, and the people who held them were sold as what? Slaves. And in every case, the same justification was available and used. This is not knowledge. These people don't have knowledge. We are bringing the knowledge. Because Europeans knew everything. That's the con. The entire ideology that this country is based on and our systems of government are based on come from the Greek, which was then transposed by the Romans as they conquered most of Europe up until England, as you know. And when Rome fell, it became the Vatican and Christianity, and they used it to then eventually colonize worlds unknown to them. and bring that ideology and snuff out what we already know from generations of being in these lands. The mathematics being destroyed were in some cases more advanced than the mathematics that were in Europe at the time. This was a choice, and I want you to hold the fact that this was a choice that they made. The white colonizers made a choice to burn everything that we knew. Because Baghdad still had all of this knowledge and they didn't burn it. So this was a choice from white imperialism. But notice how in Iran and stuff, the Arab countries, they held the knowledge and built upon it, and look how well they're thriving now versus... So not all the knowledge was destroyed, right? Some of it survived. Some of it survives in some of the customs that we have ourselves. In households and practices, in communities that kept counting even though the books were gone. But most of it's simply not here. And we don't all know what was in it because it was burned. And if you think that this is a story about the 15th century, you're wrong. Here's part B of chapter 10. Wardenclyffe. Now I'm going to talk to you about Nikola Tesla. Because you can't have a conversation in mathematics without Nikola Tesla. Okay? Nikola Tesla worked with resonance. Like the Schumann resonance. Resonance is not mysticism. It's ordinary physics. And it's the reason why an iPad or the phone in your hand can charge without a cable. Energy flows. Tesla's insight was that energy could be moved without wires if you tune the frequencies of the energies correct to each other. At Wardenclyffe or Long Island, he started building a tower to do it at scale. Remember the Tesla pole? Not to sell power, to transmit it to anyone with a receiver. We as human beings can receive waves of energy. The sun, solar energy comes in waves, right? Infrared waves, microwaves, waves, right? We don't see the waves, but we receive it. So you know, JP Morgan was the principal backer of Tesla's working on it, and then the funding stopped, but they never finished the tower. In 1917, they demolished it and sold it for scrap. Tesla died in a New York hotel in January 1943 in debt. And within days, the Federal Office of Alien Property Custodian took custody of his papers, the government. The government that currently is diving us deeper into techno-feudalism and fascism. Same government. Now, this is where we have to be careful because there's versions of this out there that people have built upon, and it's subjective to what they think or how they interpret things. Okay? So, I'm telling you, scientifically, there's no suppressed free energy. You cannot get energy from nothing. Thermodynamics is non-negotiable, and Tesla never said otherwise. Right? Newton's law of physics, for every action equal and opposite reaction. So in order to get energy, you have to get something to combust to create energy. They're thermodynamic. Atomic, collisions, right? What Tesla was trying to say or claim was that you could distribute power without metering it. You didn't need a meter, a capsule, or something. It could just flow freely. Nuts. So there's the whole thing about the numbers 3, 6, and 9 being the key to the universe. It's attributed to Tesla constantly. There's no primary actual source for it. It's not in his patents, his papers, his interviews, or his letters. Somebody made it up and the internet ran with it. But the discovery is still the truth. You could actually distribute power without metering it. That turned to be the disqualifying part. The same shape as every other chapter in the section. The knowledge was never wrong. It was unprofitable to whoever was holding the purse. Codices, Quipus, a tower on Long Island. Who did it hurt if that information got out? The European colonizers, the white supremacists. The mechanism never changes. The story continues to repeat itself. century after century. We reach these areas of knowledge, of intrinsic physical knowledge within ourselves, where we discover that we don't need what they're selling us to survive, and they come and they tear it down, and they're like, here, go buy something at the mall. Use the system that we created for you and continue to be my source of revenue and energy. Continue to use your life force, your mind, your physical body, everything that belongs to you as a human, as a soul, as whatever you subscribe to, as your entity. Use it for our benefit. We're not going to tell you what you don't need to know. I'm going to stop it right here. Nah, I'm not. We're going to go into what I found, the framework. 11 is where the record ends. So I'm going to stop. Okay? Because everything to this point, you can look it up. It's documented, source, cited. It'll be listed in the description. You can check every claim I made, and I want you to, including the ones you liked, and especially the ones you didn't like. Go check it. Go look it up. Go Google it. Go find it. This next part is what I concluded, what I came to. Okay? The framework that I built out of all of this is not what the Mexica believe, it's not what the Egyptians believe, or the Yoruba, or anybody back. This is what I came to. This is what I think it adds up to. And I'm telling you this, which is which, because I don't lie to people. And that's the whole point. Somebody once handed people cosmology and told them this is the only truth. Somebody was handed a Bible to a bunch of people and said this is the truth. This is gospel. No, I'm not telling you that. Okay? I am telling you, I took this and I interpreted it, and this is what it stood out to me. And I'm asking you to take the same stuff and see what it does to you. Because remember, reality is subjective. My reality is not your reality. Every mind is its own universe. You get where I'm going with this? Okay? So this is the line. After this, anything else, you go verify yourself, okay? So, chapter 12. We were asking the wrong question. And this is when I went like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, okay? So, if you've taken calculus, you know about L'Hopital's rule. L'Hopital's, right? L'Hopital's rule. It's known. We use it in business. Drove me crazy in undergrad when I did it at the community college level, because those calculations are insane. And you have to use the little e in your calculators. So it exists for one reason. Sometimes when you try to evaluate an expression at a limit, you get nonsense. 0 over 0, infinity over infinity. The values don't tell you anything. And the rule says stop asking about the values. Ask about the rates. Take the derivative of the top and the derivative of the bottom and look at how fast each other is changing. Notice that pattern. The answer is not in the quantities. It is in the behavior of the pattern of the numbers. It's the behavior. It is in the nature. Now, I'm not going to tell you that's the equation of the universe. It's not. Cosmologists describe the expansion with the Friedmann equations, and observed acceleration gets attributed to dark energy. Okay? That's what physics is doing, and I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But I like using it as a metaphor, okay? And what I'm telling you is that it's a metaphor. But it's the best one that I have for what every tradition in part 1 figured out was this, a metaphor. When you're dealing with something that has no bounds, demanding a final number is the wrong question, because you're never going to get an actual full answer. You will get nonsense, and they're going to say this is all bullshit, it's nonsense, and you're going to quit looking. You can hold this the pattern of change, the rate of change, the direction, the relationship, what joins things together. That is what the Tonapuali is. Nobody's counting on a final day. We're just tracking the relationship between two cycles. That's what a song line is. It's not a fixed map. It's a travel through a landscape. That's what the quipu is. Not a total. It's a structure that holds changing quantities. And that's why I think a lot of these early native systems that stayed humbled have outlasted the ones that claim completion. Not because humility is nice. It's because if the thing that you're describing is unbounded, such as the universe, then claiming that you finished describing it is simply an error. You stopped observing the moment you think it's done. Okay. Now this is where I landed last night. Chapter 13. Physics doesn't know what came before the Big Bang. Hasn't worked it out yet. The models don't extend to what created the Big Bang. Time as we describe it starts with that boundary, the Big Bang. So before might not even be a sensible word. It might not be a proper term to describe what was before the Big Bang. But I don't believe that you can get something like the Big Bang from nothing. The Big Bang is expansion, it is combustion, it is, something that continues to expand. The universe, as far as we know, is continuously expanding. We're all expanding. Everything continues to expand and expand into the cosmos. And the cosmos has no bounds. It is infinite, like L'Hopital's rule. Infinity. It goes to infinity. It would never stop. Okay? What I think that preceded it was a structural, a pattern. Before there was anything for the pattern to be made of. Relationships that would hold whether or not anyone ever existed to hold them. This isn't a discovery, this is a philosophical position, okay? And it has a name. Mathematical Platonism. Roger Penrose holds a version of it. Max Tegmark holds a much stronger one. And I hold my version of it. What I came to, or what I think that it means is this. If the substrate is mathematical, then the reason 7 civilizations that never met each other all built real mathematics is not mysterious at all. They weren't inventing it. They were reading different scripts, same text. The rope and the calendar and the chord and the song are all translations of the mathematics of existing. What makes it burning what it wasn't destroying somebody's beliefs, it was destroying somebody's readings, observations of the same thing that the destroyers claimed to care about, made by people who had been looking longer, earlier, and came to other conclusions that were supported by the mathematics of what makes our living world. I'm not telling you that I'm correct. I'm telling you, consider it. I know it's a lot. So that's why we're going to have to break this in chunks. So now chapter 14, the return. Okay, this is the most mine of it than anything else. This is more things. Okay? And I want to show you how I came to this so you can destroy it yourself. Break it apart, take it, put it back together. You do what you got to do. Okay? 7 centers, 6 parts. 7 chakras, 4 appendages, a torso and a neck. 7 and 6 equals 13. I chose that division of the body. There's nothing anatomical that makes it 6. You could go bones, whatever, The hand is separately. I picked a division and I picked one that lands where I wanted it to land because everything is subjective. Everyone's reality can be subjective. The 7 chakra system is what more people know. West came through a 19th century translation of a 16th century Sanskrit word. Other tantric lineages count 4 or 5 or 9 or 21, which is prime number. 7 is the version that traveled. It's the version. It's not the only version. So both sides of my equation are chosen and I'm keeping it, and here's why. 7 is the source, the things that grow the thing. There is no existence without a womb, and every system that forgot that has been extracting from something it refused to name. The only difference between a man and a woman is the ability to give birth for a cis woman versus a cis man. That is the womb. That makes it 7. The yin and yang of balance, right? 7. 13 Greek gods plus Chronos. 12 Greek gods plus Chronos. 7. But you gotta remember, the Greeks are gonna take this and make patriarchy. The Greeks invented patriarchy. You get what I'm telling you? The Greeks invented patriarchy. 6 is the expression, the action, the reach, the limbs, real, necessary, and derivative. Not lesser. It's the derivative. It's the derivative, right? Numerator, denominator, the derivative. 13 is what you get when the expression admits where it came from. When the male acknowledges equality, congruence with the female, you get life, you get one. When a man and a woman consummate, become one, they create one, a new being. So patriarchy's errors, I understand it, isn't that men act. It's a claim that acting came first, that men came first, that the expression is the origin. Everything built on that error extracts because it doesn't believe it knows anything upstream, which is scientifically impossible when we know that every fetus starts as every embryo starts as female. This is why a woman will always carry the eggs of which her grandchildren will come from when they carry a daughter in their womb, because the ovaries are formed and the female fetus with all the eggs they will produce, okay, before they're born. I have carried my grandchildren through my daughter when I had her in me, if she has any kids. Every system in part one that lasted was built by people who know that they were the downstream of something, observers, counters, people who kept records because they assumed the thing they were watching was bigger than what they understood. So instead of confining it to what worked for them, they kept exploring. Every system that burned out those books, patriarchy, white supremacy, was built by people who thought they arrived and encountered and knew better than anyone. Ego. That's my framework. 6, 7, 13. I chose a number and I'm telling you why I chose them. Why they make sense to me. 13 dots. And the rope, we are the rope. Go check that first half. Argue with the second. Tell me what you think. And remember, we don't need them. You understand what I'm telling you? We don't need any of it. They made it up. In our hearts, in our minds, in our roots, in our souls, we remember and we know that none of what they're selling matters. It's not real.